हरि ओम्। अद्य अहं भवद्भिः सह एकं रोचकं प्रश्नं चिन्तयितुम् इच्छामि। Today, I invite you to consider a fascinating possibility. What if the story of Dhruva, the institution of Yagya Pavitan, the practice of Gayatri Mantra, and the ancient tradition of Avadhana all revolve around a single idea, the disciplined cultivation of attention? And what if attention is one of the most powerful forces shaping the developing human brain? किमर्थं ध्रुवः ध्रुवतारत्वं प्राप्तवान्? किमर्थं भारतस्य प्राचीनाः ऋषयः बाल्ये एव गायत्री मन्त्रस्य उपदेशं ददति स्म? किमर्थम् अवधानं शिक्षायाः मूलम् इति मन्यन्ते स्म? एते प्रश्नाः पृथक् न सन्ति। एते सर्वे मानव मस्तिष्कस्य विकासेन सम्बद्धाः सन्ति। यज्ञोपवीतस्य रहस्यं किम्? भारतीय परंपरायाम् उपनयन संस्कारः केवलं सामाजिक विधिः न आसीत्, सः शिक्षायाः आरम्भः आसीत्, सः चित्त प्रशिक्षणस्य आरम्भः आसीत्, सः बालकस्य अवधान शक्तेः जागरणम् आसीत्. In traditional India, Upanayan Samskar, it was just not merely a ritual. The Janev, the Munj, the Yagya Pavit Samskar, it was not merely a ritual. It was not merely a ritual. It marked the beginning of education, the beginning of discipline in a Gurukula, the beginning of conscious cognitive training. During this training, through Upanayan Sanskar and Gayatri, a child was introduced to a daily routine, mantra, self-regulation, memory, and focused attention. Focused attention. From a neuroscientific perspective, childhood represents a period of extraordinary brain plasticity. We know many kids who undergo a surgery for a tumor during their childhood, and the tumor is in the part of the brain that controls language. After the surgery, over months to years, they show far more remarkable recovery, to the extent that they may not even have any deficit, because the plasticity-induced changes for the language function recovery, they lead to the moving of the language area to the other side, different networks. So there is a plasticity in the brain. The young brain learns rapidly. Neural circuits are highly modifiable in the young age. Experiences during this period may have long-lasting effects on cognition and behavior. भारतीय ग्रंथेषु बाल्य संस्कारस्य विशेष महत्वं दृश्यते. पंचवर्षात् पूर्वं usually it's said that one should do the Yagya Pavit Sanskar before the age of 5 if you want your child to have the Brahma Gyan. Well, I don't know about the Brahma Gyan, but I think, this is my hypothesis, it's my hypothesis, that good nurturing early on and training into focused exercises in our Indian tradition very likely contributed to improved brain functions, mental capacity, focused attention, ability to learn things quickly and fast. And remember the Vedas and the Shruti Parampara, the knowledge through hearing, listening. Develop the brain so powerful that they could learn, remember, retain, and transmit the knowledge to the next generation. So during early childhood, language networks expand rapidly, attentional systems mature, emotional regulation develops, habits become deeply ingrained. The ancient emphasis on early training may reflect a profound observation. It is easier to cultivate attention than to repair a distraction. Gayatri Mantra. Gayatri kevalam mantra naasti. Sa chittasya prasikshan pranali asti. The Gayatri Mantra may be viewed in several ways. Spiritually, it is a prayer for elimination, prachodayat. Philosophically, it is a meditation on consciousness. Cognitively, it may function as a structured attentional exercise, and consider its repeated daily recitation. What happens when a practitioner is reciting it every day? He sits quietly, regulates breathing, repeats a precise sequence, visualizes the meaning, returns attention whenever it wanders. Each time when you are doing the Sandhya and doing the Gayatri, your mind is wandering in multiple different directions and you are practicing to pull it back to Gayatri. And it's an excellent exercise to the brain. This resembles many elements studied in modern meditation research. Dhiyo yo nah prachodayat. Dhiyo yo nah prachodayat. Esha prarthanasti. Asmakam buddhayaha prerayatu. What do we say in Gayatri Mantra? The most remarkable phrase is Dhiyo yo nah prachodayat. May our intellects be inspired. May our minds be guided. So notice what we are asking for when we are doing Gayatri. We are asking for, may our intellects be inspired. May our minds be guided. We're not asking for wealth, power, pleasure. We're asking for intellect, which is inspired, mind, which is guided. But refinement of cognition also happen in the process. And that leads to the development of the mind. Gayatri tatha avadhanam. In Sanskrit or in Hindi, there is a word, savadhana. Comes from sa, dhan, avadhan, which means with avadhan, which means focused attention. Yada balakaha pratidinam gayatrim japati tada saha kevalam shabadan na punaruktavan saha avadhanasya abhyasam karoti. Saha avadhanasya abhyasam karoti. Every repetition of Gayatri requires what? Attention, memory, auditory processing, language, self-regulation. Day after day, year after year, the practice may gradually strengthen attentional habits. In other words, Gayatri may serve as a training ground for Avadhana. Avadhanam. Bharatasya adbhutatmeshu bodhik paramparasu anyatamam avadhanam nama manasaha stairyam chittasya ekagrata vikshepasya nigraha. So actually avadhanam is not merely concentration. It is sustained, deliberate, purposeful attention. I'm really grateful to my father who taught me this. I'm not great with that, but he introduced me to this early on in my childhood, such that when I'm doing something, my attention is just into what I'm doing, then everything else just mutes out most of the time, which is good, I think. Modern neuroscience suggests that attention is the gateway through which learning enters the brain. No attention, no learning, no memory, no excellence. This may be the most important educational principle ever discovered. So let's talk about Dhruva. Dhruvaha Avadhanasya Murti Rupam. Dhruvasya Sampurna Katha Avadhanasya Katha Asti. The story of Dhruva is perhaps the most beautiful illustration of Avadhana in Indian literature. Why? Because Dhruva, his story is, I've made a video on this from Purana. His story is that of a child who encounters adversity. A mentor provides direction. A meaningful goal emerges. Attention becomes focused. Practice becomes consistent. Character becomes transformed. Dhruva is not merely practicing devotion, he is practicing sustained attention. And then Bhagavan Vishnu shows up and gives him what he wanted. Sustained attention about, in this context, God, leads to the feeling as if he's right in front of him and gives him the blessings. Neuroplasticity. Adhunik Vigyana Vadati Yatra Avadhanam Gacchati. Yatra Avadhanam Gacchati Tatra Mastishka Parivartanam Anusarati. Yatra Avadhanam Gacchati. जहां जहां अवधान जाता है, होता है, तत्र मस्तिष्क परिवर्तनम अनुसरति. उसके पीछे पीछे मस्तिष्क में परिवर्तन आते हैं, न्यूरोप्लास्टिसिटी होती है. मॉडर्न न्यूरोसाइंस टीचेस अस attention shapes neural pathways. Repeated attention strengthens neural pathways. This process is known as neuroplasticity. We may summarize the journey now. What? Yagya Pavitan leads to Gayatri, leads to Avadhana, leads to neuroplasticity, leads to excellence. Upanayanam bhavati tadanantaram Gayatri. Pujanam karoti manavah balakah. Tadanantaram avadhanam bhavati. Mastiska parivartanam bhavati utkrishtata. Agacchati. Dhruvatara dhruvaha ante dhruvatara abhavat. Kimartham? Yat dhruvaha स्थैर्यस्य प्रतीकः. यतः ध्रुवः स्थैर्यस्य प्रतीकः. Dhruva becomes the pole star because he symbolizes stability. The pole star is the symbol of stability. In Sanskrit and Hindi, pole star is called Dhruva. Everything around him moves, but he doesn't move. There is stability. He remains steady. The same is true of the trained mind. The mind should remain steady. That's why Avadhanam is avashyakam, necessary. We need to train our mind. The same is true for the trained mind. Avadhanam is needed. The highest mind is not the mind with no distraction. Highest mind is not the mind with no distractions. It is the mind that knows how to return to its center. We should be able to control our mind and pull it to where we want it to be. We should be able to bring it to where we want it to be. Shamyatam ekah avarodham bhavati. So I was telling that Dhruva becomes the pole star because he symbolizes stability. Everything moves around him. Yet he remains steady. Dhruva remains steady. In Hindi, we call pole star Dhruva Tara, Dhruva star. So being steady is true of the trained mind. The highest mind is not the mind with no distraction. It is the mind that knows how to return to its center. That center is Avadhana. Vishnu Puranam Kevalam Prachin Katha Nasti Tata Manav Manovigyanasya Grantha Api Asti. Vishnu Puranam Kevalam Prachin Katha Nasti Tata Manav Manovigyanasya Grantha Api Asti. The Vishnu Puran is not merely a book of ancient stories. It is a profound reflection on human development. The story of Dhruva remains a great story, and it reminds us that greatness begins with attention. The Gayatri Mantra reminds us that the highest prayer is for the refinement of the intellect. The Upanayan tradition reminds us that the education begins early. And Avadhana reminds us that where attention goes, transformation follows. In an age of distraction, these lessons may be more relevant than ever. Dhruvavat sthiram chittam. May our minds become steady like Dhruva. Namo Narayanaya. Hari Om. Let's talk a little bit more about Avadhanam. Let's talk a little bit more about Avadhanam or Avadhana, an ancient Indian attention training and how it links to modern neuroscience. Avadhanam प्राचीन भारतीय एकाग्रता विज्ञान एवं आधुनिक तंत्रिका विज्ञान. But before I begin, I must say that I need to offer an important disclaimer. My lectures explore possible connections between traditional Indian Sanatani intellectual practices and contemporary neuroscience. And I personally believe in this, but I must highlight that while some aspects of meditation, attention training, language learning, and memory formations have been scientifically studied, many of the specific hypotheses discussed regarding Avadhana, Gayatri practice, Gurukula education, and long-term cognitive enhancement remain speculative and hypothesis generating. This lecture is intended for educational and scholarly discussion only. It should not be interpreted as a medical advice, nor as a proof of therapeutic efficacy. Future clinical trials and rigorous neuroscientific investigations will be necessary to establish causal relationships between these traditional practices and measurable cognitive outcomes. At the same time, history teaches us that many important scientific discoveries began as careful observations. So I'm sharing my observations. Ancient Indian civilization left behind a remarkable intellectual tradition. There are so many books to read: Puran, Vedas, Mahabharata, Vyakaran, Brahmana Shastra. Etc. So huge volume of literature, which touches almost every aspect of human life. And if you read and understand it, then you'll be, I think, awed by the contribution in Sanskrit literature, the contribution from ancient Indian society. Ancient Indian civilization left behind a remarkable intellectual tradition. Studying these traditions with modern scientific methods may provide some valuable insights into human cognition, attention, learning, and flourishing. Namo Namaha. Aham idanim भवद्भिः सह एकम् अत्यन्तं रोचकं विषयं चर्चयितुम् इच्छामि। अवधानम्। अवधानं केवलं स्मरणशक्तेः प्रदर्शनं नास्ति, एतत् मनसः प्रशिक्षणमस्ति, एतत् एकाग्रतायाः विज्ञानमस्ति, एतत् चित्त नियन्त्रणस्य कला अस्ति। Namaste. Today, now, in the next section, I wish to discuss one of the fascinating intellectual tradition of India, Bharat, Avadhana. Avadhana is just not merely a demonstration of memory. It is a systematic training of the mind. It is the science of attention. It is the art of directing consciousness deliberately and sustaining mental focus under challenge. Long before the development of cognitive neuroscience, ancient India produced scholars capable of extraordinary feat of concentration, memory, and multitasking. And how did they do it? And what can modern neuroscience learn from them? What is Avadhana? First, let's talk about this. Avadhan iti shabdaha ava tatha dhana ityetayoh samyogena nirmitaha. Arthaha सम्यक ध्यानम संपूर्ण एकाग्रता जागरूकता च। अवधानी नाम सह पुरुषः यः एकस्मिन् समये बहुषु विषयेषु मनः स्थापयितुं शक्नोति. The word avadhana means there is no exact English translation, but for the sake of this video and understanding, let's call it focused awareness. There are many Sanskrit words that don't have corresponding English words. So it may be difficult to understand, particularly by the audience that only speaks English, but I will try. An avadhani is a person capable of maintaining attention on multiple streams of information simultaneously while preserving accuracy. In traditional performances, several questionnaires may ask questions at the same time. One gives number, another asks literary question, another requests poetry, another imposes linguistic constraints. Hours later, the avadhani recalls everything accurately. And from modern perspective, this is astonishing. How can you do all this? These days we need computers to save our data because we can't remember things so easily. So why should neuroscience care? Modern neuroscience studies attention. We study attention. Neuroscientists study attention. Also, we study working memory, executive control, cognitive flexibility, neuroplasticity. These same domains appear central to Avadhana. One should argue that Avadhana represents a centuries-old natural experiment in human cognitive optimization. Method 1, first method, dharana, single-pointed attention. Yoga Sutreshu, Patanjali Maharshina dharana varnita. Deshabandha chittasya dharana. चित्तस्य एकस्मिन् विषये स्थिरीकरणम् एव धारणा. चित्तस्य एकस्मिन् विषये स्थिरीकरणम्. eva dharana. So the first step in dharana, focused attention, one object, one thought, one mantra, one breath, nothing else. Focused attention, the first step in dharana, the focused attention is one object, one thought, one mantra, one breath, nothing else. And this sounds simple. In reality, it is one of the most difficult things a human beings can do. Just think about it. Try doing it. Think about one object, one thought, one mantra, one breath. It's not easy. Modern studies of attention consistently demonstrate that human mind wanders frequently. And this thing comes in again in Gita as well. And Bhagavan Krishna says, Asamshay Mahabaho Manodurni Graham Chalam Abhyasena tu Kaunteya Vairagyencha Grihyate. It's very difficult, O Arjuna, to control the mind, but with practice and vairagya, you can control it. You can get there. And dharana is needed. Avadhana is needed. Dharana trains the ability to bring the mind back again and again and again. And this repeated redirection may strengthen attentional networks in the brain. When you sit and start meditating and think about one object continuously, earlier on it's very challenging. Mind runs in so many different directions. Abhyasen tu kaunteya vairagyencha grihyate. With practice, one should be able to strengthen the attentional networks in the brain and succeed in this task. Method 2, Shramana, Smarana, listening and recall. In Gurukula, students listened carefully and reproduced what they heard. No notes, no recordings, no smartphones, only attention. The student learned to encode information deeply at first exposure. Imagine you're listening and you have to listen carefully and then be able to reproduce yourself, reproduce what you heard without notes, without recordings, without smartphones, only attention. Modern neuroscience refers to this process as efficient encoding into working memory and long-term memory. So there is something called working memory and there is something called long-term memory. And one wants to, if one can achieve efficient encoding into the working memory and long-term memory, that's a great feat achieved. Reverse recall. Imagine hearing. We all neurologists, we always ask this question. Spell the word world and then repeat it in the reverse order to test the mental status of our patients. So the method 3 of Avadhana is reverse recall. Imagine hearing 2, 8, 14, 23, 51, and then now repeat them backwards, 51, 23, 14, 8, 2. This requires more than memory. It requires active mental manipulation. And we, the neurologists, neuropsychologists, we use similar tasks to assess executive function and frontal lobe performance. And the educators in the olden times in India used them as training tools. Let's talk about divided attention. This is perhaps the most famous component of Avadhana. In the modern neuroscience, we call these functions as cognitive flexibility, task switching, executive control. So what happens in this divided attention exercise, the component of Avadhana? Multiple individuals ask questions simultaneously. The Avadhani must listen, remember, prioritize, switch attention, retrieve answers. In effect, Avadhana is a real-world stress test of the human attentional system. Avadhana is a real-world stress test of the human attentional system. Number retention, the fifth method. Ancient scholars often memorize long numerical sequences, calendrical calculations, astronomical observations. And today we recognize that expert memorizers often employ chunking and structured encoding. The human brain can dramatically increase apparent memory capacity through training. The sixth method, poetry under constraints. Avadhani kavyam rachayati kintu niyamah bhavanti. Imagine composing poetry instantly while obeying multiple constraints. Kim niyamah bhavanti? Visishtah chandah, visishtah shabdah, kadachid, nishiddhah varnah, tathapi kavyam nirmiyate. This requires creativity, language fluency, working memory, error monitoring. The brain must continuously generate and evaluate possibilities. And this is a remarkable cognitive exercise. And then method 7, Nishiddhakshari. Nishiddhakshari, a classical challenge. Compose an entire verse without using a particular letter. For example, write a poem without the letter R or Ra in Hindi or Sanskrit. Every word must be monitored continuously. This resembles modern executive function training. The brain must suppress habitual responses while maintaining creative output. The eighth method, visualization. Many memory masters rely upon visualization. Information is transformed into vivid mental imagery. Modern memory champions use the memory palace. Ancient traditions in India frequently employed visualization, symbolism, spatial organization of knowledge. Different cultures discovered similar principles independently. And then comes the ninth method, Vedic chanting, which is particularly interesting. Why? Because the Vedic recitation requires very precise pronunciation, timing, rhythm, error correction, and sustained attention. Thousands of repetition over years may produce profound training effects. Several scientific studies on expert Vedic reciters have suggested enhanced verbal memory and auditory discrimination compared with controls. These observations deserve further investigation. They deserve further investigation. These principles deserve further investigation. These principles deserve further investigation. So, Gayatri and Avadhana. Now, let us connect Avadhana to Gayatri. The Gayatri Mantra concludes with Dhiyo Yo Naha Prachodayat. May that divine light inspire our intellects. Notice something remarkable. The prayer is not asking for wealth, as I mentioned earlier. It's not asking for power, not for victory, not for pleasure. It asks for refinement of the intellect. It asks for clarity. It asks for wisdom. It asks for right direction of thought. In many ways, Gayatri may be viewed as an attentional and contemplative discipline. When practiced with understanding, it engages attention, reflection, meaning, memory, self-regulation. These are the very foundations upon which Avadhana is built. So, I wish to emphasize that this is just a hypothesis, but I think that is an important hypothesis. Suppose a child begins regular attention training early in life. Suppose that training includes focused chanting, meaningful reflection, memorization, reduced distraction, repetition, ethical discipline. Would that child's brain develop differently? Could attentional networks become more efficient? Could cognitive resilience improve? Could learning become easier? These questions deserve rigorous scientific investigation. Ancient India may have accidentally discovered, or purposefully discovered, may I argue, powerful principles of cognitive training long before what we call neuroscience existed. So, for those interested in experimenting it personally, they can look into how the sandhya is done morning, noon, evening, what are the steps involved, and how it is conducted, and learn it from a spiritual master, because this is something that's typically conducted in families which have strong spiritual angle, inclination, practice. Though I think everyone should practice it, because by doing it early in the morning, in the noon, and the evening, at the time what we call sandhya, sandhi of two different stages of day. Early morning sandhya is when the night is disappearing and the day is starting. Evening sandhya is the time of sandhi. Evening sandhya is when sunset is going to happen. And at noon, again, at afternoon. And what one can potentially do is do Gayatri with attention to meaning and breath awareness. Similarly, at noon and at night, and look at the benefits. And learn more about the Vedic, the Indian practice, the Hindu practice, the Sanatani practice of Avadhanam. Avadhanam kevalam parampara nasti. Avadhanam manasaha vijnanamasti. Avadhanam smaranasya sadhanamasti. Avadhanam chitta shakteha vikasah asti. यदि वयम एतत् आधुनिक विज्ञानेन सह परीक्षेमहि तर्हि मानव मस्तिष्कस्य नूतनानि रहस्यानि ज्ञातुं शक्नुमः. So, Avadhana is more than a cultural curiosity. It's just not about curiosity. It is a sophisticated system of mental training. It is a laboratory. It's a lab of attention. It is a living tradition that may offer valuable insights into memory, focus, learning, and human flourishing. The goal is not merely to admire the past. The goal is to investigate it, to test it, to understand it, and perhaps to discover that some of humanity's oldest educational traditions still have so much important to teach us even today. Thank you. Dhiyo yo naha prachodayat. May our intellects be inspired. Hari Om. Om Namah Shivaya.